Welcome to the Hybrid Programming Case Studies from Cultural Organizations, presented by the Seattle Cultural Accessibility Consortium. And our consortium logo is in the bottom right of the slide, a slanted charcoal ramp type shape with many different bars above it. Okay, next slide. We have a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the unceded and traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and that we occupy this land. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with Indigenous communities, but serves as a first step in honoring the land we are on. Next slide, please. This slide lists norms and agreements for today's workshop. There are 3 points. The first is this is a safe space. We respect all efforts to work on accessibility issues in your organization. And the fact that you're here is a big deal. The second is that we recognize that each organization is at varying levels of accomplishment with accessibility, and we're here to help and not to judge. And then finally, we are diligent in studying and researching our resources and are interested in learning about those we may have missed. So we include as much information as we can and are also aware that there may be new information that folks out there have. So that's a great thing to add in the Q&A to bring up or in the chat, or of course to email us directly with any information you want to share or you think that we should have. Next slide. I'd like to thank our sponsors. There are 3 large logos on this slide. One is the Northwest ADA Center. It's all in red. Words Northwest. ADA is in these diamond-shaped boxes, the letters ADA Center. The Frye Art Museum, and the Group Health Foundation, which has a logo with Group Health in blue and Foundation in purple. Next slide, please. The overview for today's workshop is that there'll be an introduction to the Seattle Cultural Accessibility Consortium by Elizabeth Wellston, founder. Act 1, the first part, is that each panelist will present their case study. We'll have an intermission, a 2-minute pause. And then we'll continue with Act 2, which is a Q&A with the panelists. And then Act 3 will be a Q&A from the audience wrap up. So we'll take general questions at that point and any other points that you would like us to discuss. Okay, and so now I'd like to pass it along to Elizabeth Ralston.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jason, for that introduction. I want to say that the sponsorship should also include the Office of Arts and Culture. I apologize, must have been the wrong version of the PowerPoint. These tech issues just come up no matter what you think or plan. So thank you for the Office of Arts and Culture for sponsoring this as well. So may I have the next slide, please? So I'm really happy to see everyone here. Thank you for spending some time with us this morning. You know, this is a very important thing that you're doing. You're thinking about accessibility. So I thank you for that and coming to learn about accessibility with us this morning. My name is Elizabeth Ralston, and I use she, her pronouns. I am a white woman with short wavy silver hair, and I'm wearing a dark blue tank top with kind of a roughly kind of pattern on it. And I'm sitting on a brown sofa, which you can't see, but there is a virtual background that I'm using, and is the consortium logo, which is made of several horizontal lines of varying thicknesses, lengths, and shades of blue on top of a ramp, sloping upwards on one side and the word Consortium workshop on the other side. So the consortium was founded, as you know, as you may or may not know, in late 2018 with the mission of connecting arts and cultural organizations with information and resources to improve accessibility for people of all abilities. And I'm really excited to welcome you to our second workshop of this year. So if you are aiming for inclusion and welcoming people, this is where you want to be. This is the best way to learn about inclusion and accessibility from other people in our community. We are physically sponsored by Shumpike, and you can see the Shumpike logo, which has a powered by in a semicircle in red over the word Shumpike. May I have the next slide, please? The Seattle Cultural Accessibility Consortium asked that you consider making a donation to support our mission and future workshops. Together, we can increase accessibility. Please donate at the link bit.ly/SCAC Shunpike, and that will also be in the chat. Please take a moment to do so. We want everyone to be able to access these resources that we provide, and we love your help in sustaining this effort. In terms of what we do, we are a presenting organization. We do several workshops per year and several networking events per year called Consortium Connections, which allow arts administrators and people from the community to come together and talk about how to improve accessibility and brainstorm and problem solve. And we also have a podcast. Please check out Opening Doors. Our first season was last year, and we have an upcoming season coming out this fall. And Opening Doors amplifies the voices of people with disabilities and talking about their access to arts and culture. Next slide, please. So the goals of the workshop are to learn how arts organizations have dealt with both virtual and in-person programming and gain new ideas and strategies for incorporating accessibility into your work plan. And we have 4 organizations who will be describing their programming that they've initiated during the pandemic and how the reopening plans are shaping up. So please feel free to put all of your questions in the Q&A box rather than the chat so that we can monitor them. And we will do our best to get to all the questions in the time that's allotted. So let's go to the next slide. I am so thrilled to introduce you to our moderator. Kathy is the Cultural Partnerships and Grant Manager for the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, which has been an amazing supporter of the consortium and the work that we do. A change agent in transforming the office's community engagement and arts funding practices through a racial equity lens. She helped the agency earn the Seattle Management Association's first Race and Social Justice Management Award, and is a local award-winning theater artist. So Kathy facilitated our first virtual workshop of the pandemic last year. So it's been a full year since we've seen Kathy here, and we've seen lots of highs and lots of lows during this time. And I want to thank Kathy and the Office of Arts and Culture for being an amazing supporter of our work. So Kathy, welcome, and please take it away.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, especially for all of your leadership in this realm, which, as I hope all of us have been discovering, we need to lean into even more to create greater accessibility. And if there's been one bright spot during COVID, it's how much more aware people are of how these online virtual spaces can actually open up our ability to be more accessible. I am an Asian woman with long black sort of wavy hair, side parted on the side, in front of a cream colored plain wall that you can see part of my spider plant on one side, and wearing a red sleeveless dress. I am so thrilled to be here today and to introduce our panel. So next slide, please. Our first panelist will be Cheng, who is the Director of Education and Community Partnership at the Frye Art Museum, working to make art accessible to Seattle's diverse audiences. Michelle's work as an educator is rooted in a deep understanding of a variety of audiences and informed by over 13 years of working in art, history, and design institutions. She has a BA in art history and comparative literature from Binghamton University and an MA in art and design education from the Rhode Island School of Design. And here is Michelle.
Thank you, Kathy. Great to be here today. My name is Michelle Cheng, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a light-skinned woman of Asian descent with shoulder-length black hair, wearing a dark gray shirt and sitting in front of a bookshelf. So next slide, please. I'd like to begin with actually a program that we have coming up this Saturday, which is our first ever virtual community day. This is really in celebration of our latest exhibition at the Frye, Black Refractions, highlights from this Studio Museum in Harlem. And what's exciting is that we've been really able to leverage the digital and sort of virtual nature of programming right now into partnerships. For instance, we will be showing an original music recording in response to the artwork from the exhibition, having an encore performance developed in partnership with the Henry and Langston featuring local musicians called the Black Tones, and also a cooking demo featuring our local chef, Christy Brown. And what's exciting is that some of these things really would not have been able to happen if we were hosting an in-person community day program. So it's been interesting to play with what the virtual realm can offer. And in addition to that, we're still definitely a skeleton crew in terms of offering accessibility of resources, but it's definitely a work in progress. And so we're trying to use some of the platform's abilities. So we are using StreamYard versus Zoom. And so it's a little bit of a learning curve internally for us as we learn a whole new platform and try to make the most of it and figure out how to bring accessibility to that. But we also learned recently, which is exciting, is that the Google Chrome browser is now offering live captioning. So anyone tuning into this live stream on Google Chrome can actually have live captions built in. So we're definitely trying to keep in advance of all the technology changes in the last year, but it's an ongoing process for sure. And we made a conscious decision to offer a virtual community day rather than in person, even though we are actually open to the public right now. And we reopened back in February, actually. And what was unique is that we knew that a lot of things were still uncertain and would still be uncertain by June. And this program was planned many months in advance. So we just had to make a decision based on the knowledge we had at the time and some of the precautions and public health concerns. So we decided to really stick with a virtual community day experience. Some of the things that we've learned since we've reopened, or some things that we've adapted that I'll highlight in terms of being a museum and being open in this time. One of our latest exhibitions, our last exhibition actually, called Anastasia Renee, Don't Be Absurd, Alice in Parts, it was very multimedia focused, had a lot of significant video content. So we offered QR codes for visitors who wanted access to the transcripts for the exhibition videos, instead of offering physical transcripts for people to take away or borrow. In our current exhibition, Art on the Mind, 10 Years of Creative Aging, it's actually a celebration of the Frye offering creative aging programs since 2010. We wanted to offer larger print for folks, but this exhibition was created sort of in the stages of different eras of the pandemic. So we decided to come up with a compromise. So instead of offering takeaway large print text, we offered a larger font size on the actual label copy. So if anyone were to visit and see that exhibition in person, that particular exhibition has larger font size throughout. So we felt that that was a good compromise, given the potential largely older adult audience wanting to come through and see their work or learn more about what we do at the Frye. The other thing that we worked on was making sure that that exhibition also had closed captioning for all the video content. So that was exciting to make sure that that was something included. And so it's really changed some of our inner workings too with our exhibition teams, thinking ahead and planning exhibitions. What we've also started doing since last year, we launched a blog, and now we actually offer exhibition overview blog posts of every exhibition. So what we do is we take label copy, installation images, any images we have of artwork, and we put it all in one place. So if someone cannot come and visit in person, or let's say they did visit in person and want to revisit something, they can do so all in one place. So it's been exciting to see that change internally too. We've also created a new web page that centralizes all of our accessibility resources in one place, and that was a result of teamwork with our internal diversity committee. And so that was exciting to work on in last year, and to really pull those things together and after doing an informal internal audit, we felt that there are certain things we could accomplish right now and certain things that might make more sense as long-term goals. And the most achievable short-term goal was centralizing all of our resources on a webpage. And part of that was actually offering one contact point for people who might have questions about time ticketing, accessibility at the museum. So having everything kind of be funneled through our visitor services staff. So that's exciting as well. Next slide, please. Our lectures and artwork discussions have been really interesting to turn into this virtual realm. So one thing I'll mention is we have a really robust set of creative aging programs that are designed for people who are older adults in general, but also that might include people who are living with dementia and their care partners. So in person, we would have had a lot of different kinds of experiences. So it could be gallery discussions, art making, either in the museum or offsite in different locations. What we've been doing recently as part of the pivot that everyone did last year, especially with our new launch of the blog, is creating artwork discussions that are guided, and they feature all the image of the artwork, the questions on the screen, and then on the blog post, we offer the written scripts, so people have multiple access points. We're also taking that into a specific partnership with the Northwest African American Museum and Arts and Minds as a way to reach more people in light of our new exhibition, Black Refractions. What we've also done is taken some of the best practice we've learned in creative aging artwork discussions, like close looking, giving people wait time, maintaining a small group, reading body language, etc., and apply that to other live experiences. So we've been doing some pilot artwork discussions with the King County Library System. So it's been great to see how one program area has informed some of our other program areas. In terms of art making, we also provide multiple entry points. So we have video and written instructions. So we're trying to give people different ways to engage with our content. And when we do have live programs, we've used live captioning services from Rev and now Google Chrome. So we're excited to explore more, and as our team gets more familiar with different tools and technology. And next slide, please. And one thing I'll close on is one of the things that the Frye is a part of in the last year is this collaborative effort called Memorations. And it's really in many ways a form of cultural accessibility, offering free or low cost programs and allowing people to collaborate in ways that we didn't really think about before. But this will really inform how we might bring in-person experiences back, or hybrid experiences back, as we go forward, as we have this really great foundation for future programming and partnerships.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Michelle will be coming back when we do the Q&As. Next slide, please. Our next panelist is Sonia Gallant, who works in the Access Programs Office at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, where she helps develop and run access programs and facilitates physical accessibility at the de Young and Legion of Honor museums. Sonia has a BA from Amherst College and an MA from Winterthur Program of Early American Culture at the University of Delaware. She lives in Marin County with her husband and 3 daughters. This is Sonia.
Hi,
Welcome.
everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Hello, everyone. My name is Sonia Ochoa Gallant. I use the pronouns she, her. I am an olive-toned skinned woman of Mexican descent with long brown hair, and I'm wearing a black shirt with a purple cardigan, and I'm sitting in front of a yellow wall and wood bookcase that I've blurred in the background to obscure the messiness. So if you haven't had a chance to visit the Fine Arts Museums, it is one entity comprised of 2 museums, the de Young located inside Golden Gate Park and the Legion of Honor, which is inside Lincoln Park. Before the pandemic, access programs were 100% held in the galleries. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide on the left, the picture on the left, is an image of an in-gallery access program showing one docent leading 3 visitors on a tour in the galleries. One visitor is in a motorized wheelchair and the other 2 stand behind the person in the chair. The docent standing in front of them and is gesturing to a large, colorful, modern painting while she speaks. After the museums closed last spring, we, as everybody knows, we had to pivot and we transposed several of our programs to work online, and we've been using Zoom as our primary platform. So the picture on the right is a still shot from an Artful Discoveries program held on Zoom. This is a program designed for people who have dementia with their care partners, and it serves as one of the 2 programs I'd like to highlight here today. When the museums closed, it didn't take us long to become concerned about our regular Artful Discoveries participants who can be isolated during normal times. And that would have, we thought they'd probably be even more isolated once the shelter-in-place directives came down. So we circled with our partnership with the Northern California Alzheimer's Association. And they helped us with the logistics of getting participants on Zoom and helping them learn how to use it. And that's how we launched an online version of the Artful Discovery. So the image on the right of this slide is 2 docents in their little Zoom boxes on the very right, and they are discussing a painting. They're sharing, sort of as we are now, sharing a slide of a painting from the gallery's permanent collection. And then the 3 smaller little boxes have the pairs of participants who are zooming in for Artful Discoveries. We host this program twice a month, just as we did in the galleries before the museums closed. And we regularly fill tours to capacity, which is limited to 6 pairs of participants, in order to maintain the key element of success to this program, which is to run it as an interactive, engaging conversation about art that is not a lecture. It's worked well, and we hope to continue an online version of this program when we return to in-gallery programming, because many of our newer participants don't live within a reasonable driving distance of the museum, and they depend on Zoom to attend. The other program I'd like to touch on today is called Speak Imagery, which was created after the museums closed last spring. So we have one program that we translated from in-gallery to online, and one program that was born after the shelter-in-place directives began. I don't have a picture of this program in action. It's very new, but it is formatted as a Zoom meeting where the docent shares slide images of each work of art and pauses between each to field questions from the attendees. This program was developed in response to a request by a longtime member of the museum who asked me about the possibility of developing highly descriptive online tours for people who have low vision or are blind. Before the pandemic, most of our programming for people with vision impairment consisted of touch tours, but when the museums closed, we lost access to objects to touch, and we needed to develop an idea that would work remotely. We worked with docents and members of a low vision support group in the Bay Area called the Blind Posse, and we developed this highly descriptive program. Many people join these tours by phone, and the key element is the high level of detailed description each object gets before analysis of the piece is given, as well as frequent pauses to give time for questions before moving on to the next work of art. This program runs once a month, and we get between 20 and 30 participants each time. The big aha from developing Speak imagery is that it is popular with people who do not have vision impairment. We learned that every person viewing a work of art on a screen is visually impaired. And this changed how we transposed all our other programming for virtual presentation. And we asked docents leading all online programs to incorporate detailed descriptions using strategies from the Speak imagery development, such as discussing the size of a work of art and using real world comparisons, such as this painting is the size of a door, instead of listing dimensions in inches or centimeters. This makes all of our online programming more accessible to all our virtual visitors and is a differentiating marker from in-gallery tours. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide is a list of community organizations with whom we partner to develop and run most of our access programs. And I included it to illustrate how important our partnerships are. Artful Discoveries happens in close collaboration with the Alzheimer's Association of Northern California, as I mentioned before. They advertise the program, they vet our participants, they solicit feedback for us and for the docents. Likewise, Speak Imagery, which came from an idea from a museum member, was developed and is run with the help and support of the Blind Posse and other low vision support networks in the Bay Area. This list, which lists organizations to the left of the slide, including the Alzheimer's Association, the Veterans, we work with the Veterans Affairs Medical Office, the Bay Area Outreach and Recreation Program, San Francisco Villages, Sonoma Jewish Community Center, the ARC, and Front Porch Well Connected. And on the right of the slide, there's many of their logos. I won't describe each of them. I just included their logos to show sort of all the partnerships, all of the different relationships that we have and how important they are for us to run these programs. Next slide. Please, thank you. So looking forward, we are looking forward to hosting programs inside the museums beginning this fall. We're in conversations right now about how to maintain the goals we've earned with online programs without losing ground for in-gallery programs. So in this slide on the left, I have a picture of what we hope the in-gallery programs will look like. And we have a docent standing in front of a painting. And then this is an Artful Discoveries in the museum program. So you can see how people, we set up chairs and each pair of participants can sit comfortably in front of each work of art as they go through the museum. And then on the right, we have a cropped image of a flyer for an online tour of the exhibition about Pompeii on view at the Legion of Honor right now. And this is going to be a virtual tour, much like the Speak Imagery kinds of tours. It will probably be highly descriptive and it will be captioned. And we've also offered availability of American Sign Language interpretation as well. So we hope to go forward with both kinds of programming. And I have lots of questions for other panelists, and I'm interested in how everybody's planning on doing this once we all are back full swing in the museum. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Kathy,
Sonia. There is a question for you in the chat of mostly if you can post a link to your detailed description program for the blind low vision community, that would be great. I just want to give you the heads up so you can do it before the question answers.
Thank you, happy to.
Great. Next slide, please. Next, we have Sylvie Crow, who is a resident director at Bellevue Youth Theater, BYT, a City of Bellevue Parks and Community Services program. She has been an assistant teacher for Lauren Goldman Marshall in her Theater of Possibility classes hosted at BYT since 2017. Since November of 2020, she has been lead teaching in the virtual format. She has a BA in theater from Western Washington University and has been working at BYT for a decade. This is Sylvie. Welcome.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sylvie Crow. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a white woman with an asymmetrical, short, pink, curly haircut. I'm wearing a black t-shirt. And I'm sitting in a tan armchair in a light yellow room, and behind me are two large bookshelves. Today, I will be talking about the City of Bellevue program, Bellevue Youth Theater, and how we adapted to virtual programming during the last year, as well as how we will continue some of these practices we've adopted to ensure accessibility to our participants in the future. Next slide, please. Thank you. So at Bellevue Youth Theater, our casting policy has always been that everybody gets a part. So we have a 100% casting policy, meaning that anyone who wants to be in our shows will have an opportunity to be in our shows. And this often means that our directors are writing parts specifically for our actors in the community. However, this policy also extends offstage. We have a large community of volunteers who join to learn other aspects of theater like tech, design, and stage management, and they'll often learn those skills from professionals in their fields who are also volunteering their time at our theater. The program's mission is to provide theater arts opportunities for all young people. While our target age group is middle to high schoolers, our BYT serves a community that is as diverse in age as they are in background, experience, and ability. This creates the opportunities for mentorship, both in the theater and in interpersonal relationships. With such a diverse community, we are always evaluating our process to ensure that we continue to serve our participants and that our program is accessible to everyone. Next slide, please. Thank you. So like many theaters, Bellevue Youth Theater had to make the transition to virtual programming, and we started our virtual classes in November of 2020. These classes made it possible for us to reconnect with our community after many months of being away. We've also recently wrapped our first production back together just at the end of May, and we changed our format from an in-person stage production to a streamed radio play because this gave us more flexibility in our rehearsal process to maintain social distancing and safety for our actors. We had both in-person and virtual participants through our rehearsals and our performances. In the beginning, it was challenging to give focus to both groups in person and at home. We quickly learned the best way to set up our space so that the actors who were at home tuning in from home could see the other actors in the space, as well as see their directors. We learned it took extra attention for us to make sure that the actors who were at home made interpersonal connections with the actors who were in person. We wanted to make sure, sorry about that, we wanted to make sure that they built the same camaraderie with their cast members that they would have built had they all been participating in the same space. And streaming our shows is something that Bellevue Youth Theater will continue in the future. For all of our productions, we invested in the technology to make sure that our shows were high quality and accessible to audiences at home. And we'll work over the summer on another hybrid production using what we've learned from this past process. Okay, next slide. BYT is the host of a chapter of Theater of Possibility, which I might refer to as TOP or TOP for shorthand. Theater of Possibility is a theater class that was created by Lauren Goldman Marshall, who is a playwright, director, and teaching artist working in Seattle. In 2017, Lauren started a chapter of Theater of Possibility at Bellevue Youth Theater, and I've been her assistant teacher that whole time. Like BYT, TOP is for anyone who wants to participate, and a lot of our actors are neurodivergent. Lauren Marshall calls TOP rehearsal for life. So in Theater of Possibility, we use theater games, improv exercises, and other devising strategies to explore topics that are important to the students and relevant to their lives. Adapting this class to a virtual space was something that I wanted to try, so Lauren gave me the creative control to fit the goals of the class into a new format. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the first thing I noticed about transitioning to a virtual space was that accessibility looks different online. At first, our Zoom meetings did not have the chat feature. As a City of Bellevue program, the city had concerns about the liability of having an unmonitored chat in class. After the first session, we explained to the city that it was necessary. The chat feature was necessary for some of our actors to engage with their peers, and we were able to get the chat feature in the rest of our meetings. Something that I wanted to keep the same between in-person top classes and virtual top classes was the creation of a list of guidelines and expectations. This helps create a safe space where the students know what to expect each week, and they have a say in what that space feels like. Some examples of student expectations that they contributed to this list include come to class with an open mind, the golden rule, so treat others the way you want to be treated, and just vibe. This last one was especially important as we realized that a theater class at 5:15 p.m. on a Friday was challenging for a lot of us. Many of the actors came to class after an entire week of online learning, and some days, some of the students would join class, but when it came time to play a game, they would ask to sit out. As the weeks went on, the students continued to show up and engagement looked a little different each week, but they still joined the class. I realized that sometimes these students just needed to be in the space with other people. They wanted to feel connected with their group, even if they weren't feeling like sharing ideas. Ultimately, we learned that it was important to hold the space just to connect with each other, even if no product came from the class. The space was there each week, and it was important for those students to know that it was there for them. All right, thank you so much.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Sylvie. Our next panelist is Alexander Jones, who was hired at the end of 2020 as the Learning Accessibility Specialist, a position funded by an Institute for Museum and Library Sciences grant to carry out the Guest Inclusion Program. And this is for the zoo. The Guest Inclusion Program is focused on creating inclusive programming across the zoo based on the principles of universal design for living. Alexander joined the zoo from the Outdoors for All Foundation, where he created immersive programs for participants. He is passionate about accessibility and how it intersects with engaging individuals in a learning environment. Welcome, Alexander.
Thank you, Kathy. Glad to be here, and good morning, everyone. I'm Alexander Jones. I'm a white male with a beard and green eyes. I have short haircut, wearing a collared blue shirt with white stars. I go by he, him pronouns, and I have a virtual background behind me with birds, our tree kangaroos, and the Woodland Park Zoo logo in the upper corner. Next slide, please. So as we transitioned our zoo during the pandemic, we had a number of challenges in terms of engaging individuals with our programming at the zoo. And so we've, through the access with a grant funding, we were able to set up a distance learning program and a studio that provided access to our programmings to classes and to individuals of all abilities within the zoo. We have a learning platform that individuals can access through our webpage at zoo.org, where individuals can go to our virtual programming and access our distance learning programs. Through our distance learning programs, we have many recognizable programs that we offer, both our creature feature programs, which is a puppet show that engages individuals with our ambassador animals, and also our up close programs, which were traditionally school-based programs that we have now digitized and accessed through virtual spaces. From my perspective, we are taking these programs and looking at it from a universal design for learning perspective. And that is really engaging individuals through multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. Next slide, please. So some of the distance learning programs that we've traditionally presented live on grounds to our guests that come to our zoo, or when we go to classrooms to present, have now been presented from a virtual perspective. So you can see in one image here, our learning facilitator, Janelle, is presenting our Madagascar cockroaches to a class recently. And we have within our virtual setup, multiple cameras that we can provide greater access to individuals so they can interact from a different perspective than just presenting the animal in front of a screen. So we are providing a greater access and more engagement with individuals through our setup in our studio. Additionally, we've traditionally presented our keeper talks to live audiences on grounds, but now we've actually digitized and virtualized a lot of these programming opportunities with our keepers and our ambassador animals, and made these presentations accessible through our virtual space. And so you can see here we have Harry the skunk being presented to a classroom of individuals, and providing that access when people can't come to the zoo and be with the animals and engage with the animals that they traditionally have. So it's provided a new opportunity for our guests to come and see our animals when we had limited capacity at the time. Next slide, please. So through these distance learning programs and our grant funding that we had recently received through the IMLS, which is the Institute for Museum and Library Sciences, we are embarking on a journey through a lens of universal design for learning. And what we're really trying to do here is engage individuals, and we know that learning styles vary from individual to individual. And so we want to provide these new opportunities from our traditionally presented programs to greater access for all individuals. And so right now we're ongoing a rapid redesign process where our staff and volunteers and docents are going through a training process that'll take the entire summer to learn about the principles of universal design for learning, and then rapidly redesign and transition our programs that we're now presenting virtually and hopefully soon in person to provide, again, multiple means of engagement with our audience. And we know that there is a challenge right now from the virtual space, that there's minimal options for guests to provide action and expression with the material that we're presenting. And so that is a challenge that we see, and we are hoping to solve that through our rapid redesign process. Some of the positives that we have seen so far with our distance learning programs is providing more opportunities for guests that might not be in the Seattle-based area to come and access the zoo. So we are able to provide our content for many individuals, and they can come to our website and access our digital programming, and hopefully provide more opportunities for those individuals. We also have accessibility tools that come with the virtual space. Some of them have already been mentioned here, but live captioning is a great tool that we've been able to utilize in this digital space. And we've also been able to create a learning management system for special education teachers or students to access our material on our website and learn about our programming, or actually have zoo staff, our learning facilitators, access that material as well. Next slide, please. And that's it there. And looking forward to speaking more on that. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Alexander. So we'll have all of our panelists back, but we're going to take a brief pause shortly. Just know that the recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you want to share it with other staff or other people, you can be able to access it that way once it's uploaded. We love your feedback. So please fill out the survey that will also be emailed out to you. It really helps us really center all of you in the design of what to focus on for these workshops. And we are committed to keeping all of these programs for free. So if you do have the capacity to offer a donation of any amount, it really does help. The suggested amount for what this really costs to put on is $20 suggested donation if your organization can afford it. But again, if that is a stretch, whatever you can donate will really make a huge difference to be able to offer these. And the link again is bit.ly/SCACSHUNPIKE, and have all of our panelists come on camera. That would be great. And for everyone's knowledge, because we really want to support the artists, intermission music was by local Seattle artist Betty Michaels, and the track is called Clarity, and there's information about that in the chat as well. So what we're going to do for the next about half hour, 35 minutes, is we've got a bunch of questions that we would like the panelists to respond to. We also have some questions that some of you have been sharing with us. If there are any other questions that anyone has for our panelists, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A section of your Zoom platform, and we will try to get to as many as we can during this time. If there's one thing that I took away from what all of you shared, is that by offering these virtual programs, even as we start reopening, it's actually created a lot more access, not only for people with disabilities, but it's actually enriched the experiences of all of your programs for everybody as well. So that concept of universal design is so invaluable. So we understand the value of this hybrid, and hopefully as organizations open back up, they will continue to offer a hybrid form of both in-person and continue to offer virtual opportunities. But how do we, given how limited oftentimes our resources are, how is each of your organizations prioritizing budget, resources, staff capacity, and general support to ensure that these accessible hybrid programs do continue or even expand in the future? And these questions, if any panelist feels comfortable in coming on mic and sharing, that would be great.
I can speak from the Woodland Park Zoo's perspective. Alexander here again. I just want to say that the zoo has prioritized accessibility as a priority for the zoo, and from our earlier grant from our volunteer inclusion program to now the guest inclusion program, they have created a position entirely for accessibility, which now is the role that I manage. And so we've really prioritized how we create greater access to the zoo, and through Universal Design for Learning programming and our rapid redesign process will really create greater access for all. So I would say the zoo is fully on board in terms of creating better access, and we want to look at it from a new lens and provide greater access to our programming. We also have an inclusion advisory council that is steering our programming, made up of different organizations and individuals with disabilities to help us through this rapid redesign process. So we definitely are trying to do our part here to create greater access.
That's terrific, Alexander. So having like a committee that's actually centered and focused on creating greater access, I think is so invaluable. We've learned that in the creating greater racial equity. And I think that's definitely also true with creating greater disability access as well. And higher quality and more enriching programs for everybody. Are there any other panelists who want to share like how your organization is really centering, really making this a priority through budget and staff capacity?
I would just like to say at Fine Arts Museums, this is a conversation that we're actively having right now. So I am interested in how other organizations are managing, because I would say museum leadership is prioritizing in-gallery programming. And we're, those of us in the education department and the two of us in Access are, are kind of lobbying to maintain an online programming presence, and I don't want to say defending it, but a little bit. So I'm interested, and I get it. The museum is a special place, and until the pandemic started, we had 0 online programming. So for museum leadership that hasn't been following us or doesn't like so keyed in on the benefits that online programming, sort of the silver linings of COVID that we found, we kind of have to let them know and convince them. So that's what we're doing right now, and I hope it works, and I hope we can maintain. But that's a tug of war right now within our institution.
Thank you, Sonia, for being real about that. I will speak from my hat as a funder, but I will say that we are probably more interested in funding programs that actually do create greater access at all of the intersections with racial equity, gender equity, sexual orientation, disability. So that is leverage that you can use. That I actually think that more and more funders, that is what we want to create more of. And so to leverage the fact that funders want to fund in that direction, that might be a way for all of you to be able to ensure that there is a prioritizing of budget and resources and staff capacity for these programs. And
Thank
as
you.
I said,
Thank you.
I think Alexander's suggestion of actually forming a committee that is across different positionalities within your organization to really be focused on these issues of access for different people who have traditionally not had access, I think will really help move that conversation more. Thank you. And
Thank you.
One of the questions that we did have from audience, actually, which goes back to the question of the universal design, is this one was directed specifically for Sonia. I'm so impressed by the highly descriptive audio art tour for low vision participants. I had lectures like this in college as an art history student, and it's so wonderful that it was created with accessibility in mind. Whether you have an anecdotal or statistical information about the participants who joined that might not have be blind or have low vision, and that all people should be listening to highly descriptive art lectures to appreciate art fully. So I think the question is looking for more examples, and this could be true for you, Sonia, or for anyone and all of you did offer some examples of how really focusing on the universal design concept of creating greater access, but that by doing so, by centering people with disabilities, you're actually creating greater access for everybody.
Absolutely. And we see it in a lot of our programs, but very specifically with the highly descriptive tour. And it was like a light went on for all of us when we realized that anybody viewing a work of art on a screen is visually impaired. And the highly detailed description that a docent begins with can really enrich the experience for all virtual visitors. And I would say that it's helpful. It will be helpful in the galleries. I'm excited to try it even in the galleries when people are once again in front of a work of art, whether they are visually impaired or not. Because, working in an art museum, it's not unusual to see visitors standing in front of a painting and just kind of go, what am I supposed to be thinking about this? And it's magical what happens when you have somebody who just leads your eye around the painting. And I think your brain just can't help but start to ask questions and fill in pieces just by having the description and not by having somebody rattle off the artist and the dates and I feel like it's like a whole other way of opening visual literacy to all visitors who may not have a master's degree in art history.
Did any of the other panelists want to respond to that, of another example of how focusing on a universal design concept can actually make your programs even more enriching for everybody, but by centering, creating access for those in the disability communities?
So I think I'll go back to what I referenced in my presentation, which was how in what we learned from our creative aging artwork discussions, some of the best ways to engage people can actually work very well in this virtual setting with some of our live artwork discussions. And I think what we've learned is that, you know, different people, especially in the Zoom setting, will some will be comfortable speaking verbally, some will rather chat, and some would just want to, you know, step back, and that's fine. And I think it's a nice space that allows for all those different kinds of engagement, whereas in person you sort of expect maybe more interaction or more discussion. So I think that's been interesting to see how they're, without as much body language being able to be read or other sort of in-person elements, there's still ways to make it feel a little more accessible to folks. And I think it's a great example of sort of the curb cut effect, right? So like you design something for one audience and it ends up being helpful for so many.
Terrific. I know for me personally, I'm a very visual person. And what I've so appreciated about virtual programming is, for me, the captioning is really powerful for me because it helps my brain process the information better to be able to hear it and actually see the text of it. And so I know for me, it's actually helped support me as well. And just even in meetings, because I know in a lot of our arts and cultural venues, we spend a lot of time not just experiencing art, but we also spend a lot of times in meetings planning for all of these different kinds of programs or having community engagement opportunities. And one of the questions I like to ask all participants, because it's not about this community versus that community, but it's really like asking a question of everybody. How can we actually make this space and design it in a way that allows each person in this room to be able to engage to their fullest potential? And it's actually pretty surprising the different ways that we can actually be more inclusive of people if we really center how we can create greater access for those who have traditionally not had as much or any access to a lot of our programs. Another question that we have is, I want to focus a little bit about sometimes there are disabilities that might not be as obvious. For instance, whether there's, in this virtual realm, whether you have found effective strategies to create greater accessibility for people in the neurodiverse community with your virtual hybrid programs. And I know Alexander and Sylvie, you've both talked a little bit about this. Are there any other specific things that you might be able to share from your wisdom and experience about what might help other people thinking through their programs of how to also be inclusive of people from those neurodiverse communities as well?
Sure, I can answer a little bit about that. I think something that we learned with Theater of Possibility was originally it was more of a product-oriented class where we would get to know each of the students for about 6 weeks, and then the next 6 weeks we'd build a show together so that we would have a show to present by the end that was built by the students. However, we really changed from a product-oriented process to a more focused on the process, where we were connecting with each other and finding out themes that were important to these students and playing with those themes, but we were less focused on a finished final product that looked nice and clean and really just had it be about connecting with each other and learning from each other.
Great, thanks for sharing. Any other panelists have other thoughts on this?
Well, one thing I'll add that's sort of interesting is as we're looking ahead and plan to bring back in-person experiences slowly is, are there people we have been missing in our normal experiences? And with our limited capacity, is this actually a great opportunity to engage those folks or different audiences that would benefit from smaller capacity or quieter hours or whatever the case might be? So I think it's turning it from a challenge to that opportunity, which is exciting. And thinking, and we're sort of in the early stages of those conversations, but I think starting that outreach will be an important part of it.
I'd have to piggyback on Michelle's comment as well, is that as we at the zoo have a space called Zoomasium, where we have opportunities to present our programming to our guests, and we have sensory-free Fridays where we turn down the lights and create a space for individuals to learn in an environment that's sensory friendly for them. But this hybrid model where we're able to provide access from a virtual perspective can create a new space for individuals to access it from their comfort of their own home, or they can come to the zoo and also create a social story that is consistent messaging from what they see on grounds to what they see maybe in preparation before they come to the zoo, to know what to expect and have this ability to have a unique understanding and pre-learning before they come to the zoo. So there's, I think, hopefully in the future as we go forward, that we don't go away from the virtual space, but we make this a priority in both things. As much as we want people back on grounds, we want both opportunities.
Thank you, everyone. I know I have a number of friends who are on the autism spectrum, and what they've shared with how much they appreciate the online options is then they can watch a performance on Zoom, and they can actually adjust the screen brightness or adjust the volume on the audio so that they can engage with it at a level that makes them be able to really enjoy the presentation that much more, and they have complete control over that. And so that's just been just one of the direct, easy things that the virtual realm has allowed them during this time. And so yes, that's why it's so important to still continue some form of these different access points. Let's see, we have another specific question of Sylvie, can you provide a specific example of how you created a virtual rehearsal space that was inclusive? Did you require actors to have cameras on the entire time, for example, or maybe some other specifics? I think there's a lot of people out here from looking at the list who are like you, focused on that rehearsal or classroom experience that might not be like the end product. And so if you have other examples of how you're able to create access, especially if there are different ways that different students needed to engage in order to feel like they could participate.
Absolutely. So the way that it applied in my class, which was a little bit different than my rehearsals. So for the Theater of Possibility class, I didn't require students to turn on their cameras or unmute themselves because often they would do that. They would make that choice for themselves when they felt ready, when they felt comfortable in the space. And that might have taken 5 to 10 minutes of being in the space with everybody before they felt ready to turn on their cameras or check in. That gave them the space to kind of gauge how they were feeling and then decide whether or not or how much participation they wanted that class. As far as rehearsals went for the main stage production that was both in person and virtual, so it was hybrid, we did want our actors who were at home to turn on their cameras when they were at home, even if just for the first 10 minutes of rehearsal. Part of adapting that rehearsal schedule meant that we gave extra time either at the beginning or the end for in-person actors to connect with those who are at home. That way they were really building that cast community that we get when we're in theater. That's part of why these actors come to the theater, is to be in a show with their friends. So making sure we left time in our rehearsal process, taking out the urgency of rehearsing just to get the show ready. We gave that time so that they could connect with each other.
That's terrific. Thank you. So I know that one of the things that we really want to make sure is part of a lot of these kinds of new ways of looking at programs is how we are involving people from the disability community directly in the creation of the programs and services, so that they're actually brought in at the very beginning, not like later on in the process, but actually helping to design what the experience might be, what the program might be, or even be on staff itself to actually come up with what the programs might be. And I was just curious if any of you had specific examples of how you were actually engaging the participation of people really, really early on, or part of the decision-making process and design process.
I can kind of speak. I mentioned before about our Inclusion Advisory Council, but in addition to our Inclusion Advisory Council, we actually wrote within our grant funding for compensation for disability consultants. So these are individuals with disabilities that we are paying for their work to consult on our project from a really early stage. So as we go through our rapid redesign process, we want to engage individuals that access our zoo from the accessibility perspective that they have, both lived experience and professional experience that they have. So, and we also understand that there is, a financial obligation to pay for those services as well. So we wrote those specifically in the grant to have those consultants come on board, as well as our Inclusion Advisory Council to advise us. I would also say that we have volunteers with disabilities that are on grounds. So greater representation of individuals on grounds for our guests to see individuals with disabilities, providing learning opportunities. So.
That's terrific. Thank you, Alexander. Anyone else like to respond to that?
I can, only because it's really so important to everything that we do. And I mentioned in my presentation that whole list of organizations that we partner with and depend on for advice and counsel for all of our access programming. In addition to having a volunteer group we call the Access Advisory Group, sounds similar to Alexander's inclusive group. And just there's only two of us part-time. Both of us are part-time, so it's like one full-time job, and to do all of this stuff we depend on our docents, on our community partnerships. And that highly descriptive online tour came from a museum member who asked us to respond to a need.
Thank you so much, Sonia. I know one example that I heard about, this was a number of years ago, was actually, it was a visual artists who, this one group of people wanted to do an exhibit of visual art where all the visual art was created by people with different disabilities. And one of the things I loved about what they did was, instead of having like someone on staff like write all the visual audio captions, or the audio captions that would be read, what they did was they actually invited each of the artists as an option if they so chose. So centering the artist, and all the artists were people with different disabilities, to write their own audio description of their artwork. And it was a beautiful way of centering the artist and the people with disabilities, but it also opened up the minds of the different people with disabilities, because there were a few artists who were blind or low vision, but the majority of artists were people who might have been had a physical disability, like being in a wheelchair, or someone who is deaf, or someone with a neurological disability, and so it was actually very. It was a really wonderful learning experience for like one of the artists who shared. He is an artist who paints and was in a wheelchair, and he shared that it really opened up his mind in terms of other people with different disabilities than his disability, about you know, him being able to describe as an artist what he wanted people to see and pay attention to in his painting, in a way to create greater access for other people. But then, as you've talked about, Sonia, already, but then it opens up the minds of so many other people, and being able to see that artwork through the artist at the same time as really helping people who might not be able to visually see the artist, but be able to experience the artwork. And so I just thought that was a wonderful example of how you actually engage people with disabilities from the beginning as a center of the whole arts experience, and in a way where it actually opened all of their eyes as well. So I just offer that for people to, what I love about all these conversations, and I think, Michelle, you mentioned this, it's that positive framework. It's not about like, how do we deal with these challenges of, you know, accessibility? No, it's actually, we are creative people here. We are a sector made of creative, imaginative people. How do we actually lean into our creative minds to actually create more potential and create work that actually becomes more engaging with everybody? I did want to ask a question about how all of you evaluate the effectiveness of your programming, especially when it comes to accessibility. How do you know it's working? How do you know that you're actually creating greater access for people with disabilities and for other people in that process? And how do you get feedback directly from these communities and these individuals on how you might be able to continue to evolve what you're doing?
Okay, this is Sonia. I can take a stab at this. Right now, we're doing a lot of like sort of anecdotal kinds of responses. So for our new highly descriptive speak imagery, we partnered with that casual. It's not like a formalized group called the Blind Posse, and they have members in that group. They call themselves the Blind Ambassadors, and they work actually with several Bay Area museums, helping them do these highly descriptive tours. And one of them, she's you know, partnered with me. We've had a lot of phone calls, and we draft questions. What do we want to know? What are we, you know, how would we measure what's a successful program? And I printed quickly. She asked them, oh, now I can find it. Oh, so she asked them, you know, are you able to see the works of art? We want to know how many people who are low vision, how many people are on the phone and can't see anything at all, or how many people are you know, online with their friend or family member and can see. And so we can differentiate like that. And then we ask them how much they enjoy the presentation, how much fun is it, what they liked, what suggestions they have. We decided to host these programs with 2 docents instead of 1. They sort of tag team, and they help each other, because the slide present, you know, one person moving the slides, one person speaking, getting the conversation going when it's question time. It helps to have 2 docents. Was that distracting? You know, we asked if people would come back, would they recommend us to friends? And we drafted these questions, and after a program, she sends it out to everybody who registered. So maybe some of people registered that didn't attend, they'll get the survey. And we've gotten a nice, you know, response, and she collates them for us, and we have another conversation, and we bring in the docents who led the program, and we talk to them about the suggestions that we got, the feedback we got. I mean, it's all work in progress as we go, but that's what we're doing right now. And, you know, each time we can refine it a little bit more and, you know, move it forward a little bit more.
That's great. Yeah, we don't have to be perfect right off the bat, but we need to start somewhere and just try to create the accessibility we want, inclusion. Anyone else have any other ways that you are evaluating your programs, or knowing that they are working, especially reaching the people that we really want to make sure who've had the least access oftentimes?
We at the zoo have a whole evaluation process that we are ongoing for our guest inclusion grant specifically. So our objectives and goals and outcomes, we will be evaluating both from perspectives from our Inclusion Advisory Council, from our disability consultants, and our guests that come on ground. So we're hoping to provide surveys and Q&A feedback or focus groups as we present our rapidly redesigned programs to see if they're working as we go forward through the grant. So we have, hopefully through that evaluation process, we're able to see the successes of these programs. Again, we need to see successes of these programs through our grant funding to meet our objectives. So.
Thanks, Alexander. Anyone else, even if it's just just starting place of how you make sure that the programming is truly accessible?
Sure. Because we are a City of Bellevue program, we do give evaluations to every participant and volunteer who's engaged in our community, and that kind of checks in to see how their experience was and what changes they would like to see made for them to feel either safer or more comfortable, or to have the space be more accessible. And so every single process, participants are asked to anonymously give their feedback, and those are all kept on record with the city so that as we receive that feedback, we can apply those changes.
Great. And I know we had a very specific question in chat, which thank you, Alexander, for answering. But just as a general question for all of you, are there resources for hybrid programming that you can suggest, or resources, and they don't have to necessarily even be monetary ones, but any resources or that helped you in designing the programs that you have that you feel might be useful for the people who are in our workshop today?
One thing I'll share is the Western Museums Association has been doing some really great webinars and online programs. And they actually had a recent module focused specifically on digital accessibility. And I think they're all recordings now, so it's worth checking those out. But they also have some great upcoming resources that I think my team and I have been hopping on as we can, as we want to learn more and think about how do we integrate some more of this into our process from the very beginning.
Thanks. Anyone else? I want to give all the panelists a chance in the 5 minutes we have left for the question and answer session. Do you have any questions of each other based on the presentations and what you've heard, and that you would really love to support you in what you're doing in terms of expanding your programming into the virtual realm, along with the upcoming, hopefully, reopening of all of our programs in person?
This is Sonia. I have a question for Michelle. Michelle, you mentioned in your presentation that you use a platform other than Zoom. So I had curiosity just about how you choose, and this goes for everybody, because we went through quite a muddle in the beginning of, finding blue jeans versus this, and what, how it works. And there seems to be pros and cons to each. So I was wondering if maybe we could touch on that a little bit. And also the Google Chrome offering live captioning. So, we have found with the automatic captioning to be, maybe difficult, because if you're speaking about a particular artist who has a difficult name to pronounce or something, the captioning can be off, and depending on how off it is, it's not great. But it can be, live captioning is, an investment. So, what have you found? Maybe all of us have found with doing these online programs, live captioning versus auto captions. If anybody has any wisdom to share.
Yeah, so the platform I referenced was called StreamYard, and it's really great for playing video content. It's sort of designed for that. And so it's a little more robust compared to Zoom for video specific content. But it does have limitations, so it doesn't have easy integration with live captioning services. I recently learned actually about another service through this Western Museums Association series of webinars, a service called Stream Text that basically takes over the web page itself. So it overlays all the features on top. So it doesn't matter what platform you're using. We didn't have a chance to explore that before our event this week because, you know, we found out a little too late, but that's definitely worthwhile to check out. And I think for us, we, landed on StreamYard because we heard other folks using it. It came recommended. We also use that for our virtual openings, which has gone well because, again, it was sort of video heavy content. What I've seen work really well is actually locally here in Seattle, Arts Fund uses Crowdcast. And that really is nice because there is no limitation for, people don't have to sign into something to make comments. The live captioning seemed to work really seamlessly with that platform. So I'd be curious to learn more on our end too. And I think Crowdcast is used by Arts Fund. And I think Northwest African American Museum has been using that too. And it looks really nice and clean. So it's worthwhile.
We do use Stream Text. I would recommend that as well. It works great.
Great to know. Thanks.
And I do know, like for meetings, Google Chrome has actually, of all the different auto captioning, there's a wide range. I have found that Google Chrome tends to be a little bit more accurate, even with people who might have different regional accents or even foreign accents. It's a little bit more accurate. There's still, obviously, it's not as ideal as live captioning, but. So we have a minute left, and I just want to, and I know Elizabeth probably say this too, but I just always want to give a huge thank you to our ASL interpreters for their amazing support of the program. So thank you very, very much. Thank you to all of you panelists. Just so many great resources and just really inspirational models of how we can really serve our entire arts and cultural community, not only those who want to participate as artists or as learners, but also just audiences and inclusion as well. And so I want to bring Elizabeth back on screen and on mic, and she will actually close us out. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Wow, what an amazing and rich discussion. I am really full of gratitude for all of you and all the work that you're doing. Thank you, Kathy, for doing a phenomenal job. And thank you to all our panelists, the captioner, interpreters, the moderator, and a shout out to the SCAC steering committee who are making this happen on the back end. Thank you to all of this great teamwork. Please like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You know where our website is. And thank you to everybody who has donated so far. Please continue to donate at bit.ly/SCAC Sunpike. $20 or whatever works for you is a suggested donation. Upcoming workshop will be in the fall sometime, probably October or early November. And our podcast season 2 will be released at the end of August, early September. So stay tuned for that. And we'll be sending a survey to you because we constantly want to improve our workshops and respond to what people's needs are. So please fill that out and send that back. And once again, thank you all for your time and for being on this journey of accessibility with us. And have a great rest of your day, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you.